What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a first look at Octopath Traveler 0, the upcoming prequel to Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, which I enjoyed quite a bit, so naturally I wanted to take a look at this particular entry. Now this one is actually set to release in a couple weeks at the beginning of December. I'm bringing you this look now because yesterday, from the time of this video, they dropped a publicly available prologue demo. Like many of Square Enix's prologue demos, you'll be able to play through what is available in this demo, and then that'll carry forward into the main game if you would like to do that. And overall, I'm a pretty big fan of that strategy just because I think it helps people get an idea of what they are paying for. Very pro demo around here. And while this game is doing some fun things that I think are worth talking about, let's go ahead and rip the band-aid off with, I would say, probably one of the more important bits of information to know. If you look at the pricing of this particular one, you'll notice that it is $50 US for the base game, which is unusual because Square Enix is one of those companies that's pretty married to a $60 price point, even in situations where that doesn't make a lot of sense. So why is this one $10 cheaper? Well, that is because Octopath Traveler 0 is actually based on what used to be an old mobile game called Champions of the Continent, and what Zero here is doing is basically taking the foundations of that mobile game and then turning it into like a full-blown experience. This is why, if you look at the game, the visual quality of the graphics, the HD 2D graphics in particular, is a little less than Octopath Traveler 2, but is pretty on par with 1. But as you would probably expect, it's not exactly a one-for-one experience with that mobile game either. Obviously, they took out all the free-to-play microtransaction nonsense that tends to come with those, first and foremost, but they've actually also added on to it pretty significantly. Apparently, the story itself is about 30 or 40% longer with a bunch of new additions, and that will include completely new features like the town building, which we're going to get into. So it looks like they made some serious effort of taking the base of what the mobile game was about and then turning that into a full-fledged game. And I think it's important people know that up front. And having played through this prologue, I'm not too concerned about it outside of the fact that Octopath Traveler 2 just looked substantially better than this. And while it is a prequel, I have to admit that's a little bit disappointing. I think Octopath Traveler 2's rendition of their HD 2D graphics in particular was gorgeous, and not seeing that replicated here is a bit of a bummer, but not really a deal breaker. Now, otherwise, if you've played Octopath Traveler 1 or 2, a good chunk of this will feel familiar. However, when you start this one, you actually get to make your own character this time around. Or more specifically, you get to customize your sprite, might be a better way to put it, but basically you'll get to customize things like their hairstyle, eye color, their default pose, their voice a little bit even. You'll go on to be able to pick things like their favorite dish, as well as some starting belongings and even some starting abilities. Towards the end of the sort of introductory bit, you'll be able to pick your starting job as well from the ones that are available. Pretty much your standard ones, warrior, thief, rogue, mage, scholar, that kind of thing. And you'll be able to swap these out eventually, but it will determine where this character starts in terms of the general progression that has gone into these games, which remains relatively unchanged. Once you are done with that bit of customization, though, the story starts in full. Now, the story of this game is going to revolve around the destruction and subsequent restoration of your town known as Wishvale, as well as the people who destroyed it, of course. With that in mind, a lot of the themes of the game are around wealth, power, and fame, quite literally. Those three let's say characteristics are embodied by the game's main three villains, which it introduces straight away, but also later on a little bit of you too, actually. So what those three villains are after are these 8 divine rings, which allow them to consolidate their power. They are searching for one that was found around Wishvale, which is why your town gets destroyed and your parents and much of your known world basically gets destroyed in the process. Having barely escaped certain death from that, you actually find yourself in possession of said ring and obviously want to enact your vengeance upon the people who did this alongside rebuilding the town. And those two combined are kind of like the main story of the title. In order to do that, we're going to be coming across a wide variety of characters. My understanding there is up to like 30 recruitable characters. You'll be able to take up to a party of 8 with you, swapping out between like teams of 4 in combat itself. And some of those recruits, at the very least, I'd have to imagine, are part of the town building. So one of the game's unique features, you'll actually be with your childhood friend Stia, who's one of your companions, also rebuilding the town. And as you complete objectives and expand and everything, you'll be able to like pop up buildings and make more stuff, like decorate the area even. And I'm curious to see how far they wind up taking that, or if it winds up, just being more or less a pretty basic system. But as you pursue all of that, you're naturally going to be progressing a little bit. The progression and combat are pretty much what you'd expect from the previous Octopath Traveler. It doesn't really look like they changed the fundamentals here. Basically, as you participate in combat as your job, you'll earn experience, which increases your level, yes, but then also JP, which gives you the ability to earn various like skills and abilities for the job you are currently in to use, and then some of that is going to transfer over the more and more jobs you have mastered and all that. But you'll also have like skills and things you can equip just outside the nature of that. But again, if you've played some of the originals, you'll kind of get the gist, and we'll go over more of that in the actual review itself. But how that translates to combat has always been one of the better parts of these games, I think, and for the most part, it retains that boost and break system from the other titles. Enemies have weaknesses. As you hit them, you'll chip away at their current armor rating, and then when that hits 0, they go into a break status, which effectively stuns them, which is how you can prevent them from doing big wind-up, high damage ability attacks. And as you make attacks and actions, you'll gain boost points, which you can then spend on your turn to charge up subsequent attacks and potentially break through their armor points even more to try to continue to break them. It's a simple but honestly pretty fun system to mess around with, especially once you get rolling with the jobs. But what I'm actually curious about this personally is from Octopath Traveler 2 actually, because that game was a little bit broken in the sense that much of the game could be trivialized by the merchant job. So the merchant job allowed you to hire outsiders to basically deal damage to the enemy. You could just grind up cash and just slaughter everything by hiring people essentially to do combat for you, which was both really funny but also kind of broken in the sense that it trivialized everything. And so I'm curious with this entry if they'll wind up taking that in a place that feels more cohesive and makes more use of things like the tactics and stuff outside of just, being able to make perfect use of some cheese strategies, which, while funny, isn't exactly the most engaging experience. Now, one thing that will be new here that I alluded to a little bit earlier that I know for sure is being added is the action skill system. Basically, there are skills that you can pick up that kind of act as items you can equip to characters, these being your action skills. These are typically high-cost, high-value abilities that, you have to equip, and so they are limited in nature, but they deal tremendous effects, but you're really only going to be able to use them maybe a couple times per battle because of the cost associated with using them on your sort of resource pool. On top of that, your rings will also provide you with ultimate abilities, so there's some stuff going on there, I guess is my point, which leaves me hopeful the combat in particular is going to be something really great. But outside of that, we see the return of the path action system, which is how you interact with townsfolk. I've liked this system a lot, just because it kind of makes the world feel alive. You can walk up to a lot of citizens and, do things like inquire and stuff. This game in particular ties that to your wealth, power, and fame stats, as your ability to perform a lot of these path actions is determined by your stats versus the NPC's stats in those things. So curious to see, again, if they've expanded that system or if it's still pretty much the same. But even if it is the same, I enjoyed it a lot in the previous entries because it, again, makes the world feel a bit more active, let's say. But that, I think, is just about everything I've noticed about Octopath Traveler 0 here via its initial prologue demo. And so, as a sort of first impressions, first take kind of thing goes, my main takeaway from this is that it seems pretty enjoyable. I like what they're trying to do with a lot of these new features. Obviously, I'll have to see how some of this plays out over the course of the full game, like with combat. Did they do anything fun there? Or is it, more or less just the same system from the previous ones, that kind of thing? How good is the story? The obvious stuff. But the part that is just a bummer to me is that the visual quality of Octopath Traveler 2 was just tremendous. And seeing that downgraded here, even if it isn't awful or anything, is a bummer to me personally, at least. But with that, I think that's pretty much everything I've got to say on this for the time being, so hopefully you enjoyed that particular video. If you did, by all means, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.